Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about my do-it-yourself Suncatcher with textured clear glass. Now this is glass that you can buy. I bought these on Amazon. They are pre-cut, like they're used for mosaic work most of the time, but I'm using them in stained glass work. So I'm using my favorite 9/32 inch black backed foil, and I am using the whole width for these pieces because these are the same thickness as your normal glass that you would use for stained glass, the stuff you'd buy in sheets. So I'm lining them up evenly so that the top and the bottom are the same, because you're going to be able to see through these pieces of glass, and you want to make sure that they look nice and even on both sides. Now, if you happen to come up with an uneven area like that, you can either cut off the extra little loop that you have created by a mistake, or you can do like I did and just kind of tuck that little tail in so that it'll still look like a smooth line when you're done. Now you want to use some kind of fit or plastic, or rub it on the tabletop or something to be able to smooth the foil as much as possible onto the glass, because if the foil's not stuck down nicely, then it will kind of disconnect as you are soldering, and you'll have like a little gap. And plus, if it's not stuck down nicely, then you won't have a nice secure product when you're done. Your glass may have a tendency to fall out. Now these are wrapped around the glass, not like some of the works I do where the foil is actually only on the edge. So you have a better chance when you're wrapping around that everything's going to stay together, and your glass isn't going to pop out when you're working, and when you're done you're going to have a nice solid product that's not in any danger of coming apart, which is always nice. Now these pieces of glass are quite large, which is why I don't mind going around them. I'm not taking up much space with my design. Okay, now I'm using some hoops that you usually buy for macrame, but these I bought for this product. I did wrap the metal alloy hoops with foil. You can either go around and around like some of my videos show, or you can just go the long way, but then you need to squish down the foil again so that it's adhered to your hoops. The reason why you put foil on these hoops is because they won't accept solder. There's some kind of metal alloy usually, and usually solder will not adhere to it. Now I attached one of my triangles to the circle, and I'm trying to figure out what design I want to use on the inside. So I'm just kind of playing with the pieces that I foiled. So I foiled a whole bunch of different size shapes, mosaic shapes, and I'm just playing with them. So I also bought some smaller textured mosaic glass, pretty much the same except the normal smaller size, and I might use them also, but I just tried a lot of different shapes and sizes to come up with something that would kind of fit symmetrically, because that's what this whole thing is, a very symmetrical design. But I wanted them to fit symmetrically and attractively, etc., etc. So this is what I came up with, and I'm just tacking them down. As you notice, I'm not like soldering the whole foil at this point, and I didn't pre-tin the foil. I'm going to tin all the foil when I'm done. So I'm just kind of just tacking them down so they'll be ready to attach, to completely solder when I'm done, which is what I'm doing right now. So I have it all tacked down, and now I'm just adding solder to all the foil. And again, you don't want to heat up the foil too much when you're going. You don't want to do like all of one particular mosaic piece at once. You want to kind of skip around, because even though the foil is wrapped around the glass on this product, it still will have more of a tendency of kind of releasing from the glass if you heat it up too much. So I'm just kind of hopping around my circle and doing it here and there, and not worrying about doing it, you know, completely all at once. So I'm doing one side, and then I'm going to turn it over and do the other side. I want to do all the joints, and I want to end up doing all the sides of this. At this point, I wasn't really sure what color patina I want to do when I'm done. I ended up using the copper colored patina, but hey, you never really know sometimes when you're working, you know, what you're going to decide when you're done. So I like to give myself the opportunity to change my mind or whatever while I'm working. I'm using 60/40 tin lid solder. I'm thinking of using, going into some lead-free solder and seeing how I like working with that. The trouble is lead-free solder costs twice or three times as much as your tin lead. So it's a little bit harder to work with. So I haven't delved into that for stained glass at this point. So if there's any gaps that I don't like, I'm filling them in. But I want to have, you know, definite gaps between each piece. I want to have open areas. Now I am adding little pieces of mosaic to this. Now, of course, I did count all the places I wanted to use to make sure that it was symmetrical. That, I mean, I had an even number of spaces, because that would be really bad to be, you know, solder these down and be all done and then figure out that, oh my gosh, it's not an even number, and end up with, you know, them not going every other triangle space. So if that happened, if it was an odd number, I just would have used the same shape of small mosaic pieces on each of the triangle spaces. And then I just would have worked from there. But because I had an even number, I decided I could go every other one. And now I'm adding yet another mosaic shape that I have foiled, textured clear, that I foiled, and I'm just attaching them to each one of these. I had to actually go and order more glass at one point when I was doing this product, because I actually ran out. It takes more than one would think. So as you can see, I'm turning it over and soldering the other side to make sure it's all attached as much as possible. Now you may be saying, oh my gosh, those things are so wimpy. You know, you have all these really heavy, what are they, six-sided? Yeah, six-sided pieces of glass attached way out on the edge. You know, that's not really going to be very secure, even if you solder both sides and you foiled it all. So what I'm doing to fix that problem is I am wrapping wire around every single piece. Of course, this takes time, but it's well worth it, because it's going to hold my product together. I think I use 26 gauge wire for this. Sometimes I use the 22, which is a little bit thicker, which is very, I like the thicker wire because it's stronger, but because I had to bend so much to go around each one of these pieces, it's just easier to work with a thinner wire. Now, of course, you could go even thinner. You could go to a 28 gauge, but obviously, the thinner the wire that you use, you're not going to have as much strength. So you have to balance between, what works best for this project. You want to use probably the thickest wire that you think you can work with. So at some points I bent it first before I went, and then at some points I just like soldered as I went. That kind of worked nice. I kind of used a solder iron and used that to bend it as I went. After you get it started, like you saw a few minutes ago, then it's easy to kind of do what I'm doing right now and just kind of bend as you go, because you have the strength of it already attached. And then after I tacked it down in places, I went back and made sure everything was soldered down. Now you notice I do use scraps of solder, like that's those little globs on on my work surface there. You don't have to use brand new. In fact, on a product like this, where you don't you're when you're using one hand to hold the wire and the other hand to solder, you really can't hold the solder also. So you really need to use scraps. I then put it in a plastic Ziploc bag and put the patina in there and just kind of mix it up until I got a nice look. Now, yeah, this is a copper patina, but it does look very black once it's lit from behind. Thanks for watching. Till next time, bye-bye.